Hey guys, it's that time again for another Q&A video. Now granted, technically this video was supposed to be next week and this week was supposed to be a more proper theory video, but then my schedule for the week got kind of rejiggered, and quite frankly these take less time to make, so I'm going to be making this for this week and that proper theory will go next week. So out of necessity, it is time again for another Q&A, and this time, this is the first time that some of the questions in the Q&A will be coming from the official email address for this Q&A series, that is ajqa@gmail.com. I'll be taking about 3 or 4 of them from there and about 3 or 4 of them from the collection of questions that I've gotten other places. Again, I'm kind of playing it by ear, just like the last couple of times, regarding what I feel like is a good length for the video. Jumping right into it, I'm going to start from one that showed up on my Tumblr page. Do you think that it is possible for 2 gems to give birth without needing a human? I mean, they can shapeshift the necessary organs and body parts, and we know that their bodies can create body fluids, so technically they can also create sperm and ovums. So do you think it is possible that they could end up giving birth to a living hologram without a gemstone? No. You can't give birth to a living hologram. That's an oxymoron. And they're not exactly holograms. Hologram isn't the correct term for what gems are. It's an oversimplification. A hologram can't create a liquid that's actually wet. For example, it can only create the image of a liquid. And yet we know that gems sweat real sweat and cry real tears. What the gems are, the best guess that we have, and the classification that I've been working off of, is that they are hard light simulations. They're light that has been coaxed through technology in the gemstone to behave like actual organic matter. All of the systems in their bodies are simulations of those systems, what those systems would be in an equivalent humanoid counterpart to a gem. But they are made out of light, and that simulation is regulated by the gemstone. That's why they're able to poof. When the simulation becomes too disrupted to continue to function properly, it has to be reset. They poof, and the simulation only resumes at a later point once they're ready for it to resume. That's when they regenerate. So while, yeah, technically, while it is possible that a gem could create simulated sperm from hard light, and another gem could create a simulated ovum from hard light, and they could maybe network their gems together to simulate the process of that ovum being fertilized by that sperm, and then one of them could simulate growing a child inside of them and carrying it to term, and then simulate the birth of that child, and then that child would have a simulated existence. That simulation would still be run by one or more of those gemstones. It wouldn't be an independent entity. It would still be linked to one or more of its parents. I say one or more because I have no idea how this would work, if both gems would sort of run the program at the same time, or just the mother gem would run the program once it was under her control. This is all incredibly hypothetical. And it's possible that this simulated being could live a full life. But because a gem is not intended to be able to do this, because that simulation and its continued existence would still be based on the programming within that gemstone that is controlling it, that is regulating it. First off, the parent died, so would the child, immediately. And then if the child should poof, I don't know if they would be able to reform, because a gemstone simply isn't designed to do that. If the parent poofed, I don't know if the child would poof with them, or if they would be able to reform when the parent did, because a gemstone isn't designed to be able to do that. Again, all incredibly hypothetical, but those are the best kinds of questions for a thing like this. I really like the idea, and I'd like to see something done with this, if possible, maybe not in the show, but in like supplementary works. I doubt we will ever see that, though, unfortunately. Let's take one from the email account now. I'm actually going to work from the bottom and just kind of work my way up to the top, going from oldest to newest. How many of Peridot's abilities do you think were actually her own? It seems like gems can produce unique bubbles enhanced with their own powers. Steven's shield bubble, for example. So I've been wondering if the levitation field she used in Catch and Release might be something similar. Well, we know for a fact now, because we've seen that Aquamarine uses the same tech, but that's just not the case. It is technology, and quite frankly, Steven is the only gem who is able to do that. Other bubbles, the containment bubbles, are a completely different ability. As for which of Peridot's powers specifically I think were hers and which ones belong to the arms and legs, I'm not convinced that she wasn't manipulating the digits of those arms with her metal control powers. Yes, we do see similar digits in one of the episodes where they were on the zoo. I can't remember exactly which one it was. Maybe the zoo itself. I don't remember exactly. We did see them acting independently of any sort of arm or controlling gem. So I'm less sure of that now than I used to be, but it is still possible that Peridot was using her metal control abilities to manipulate the digits of those arms without even realizing it. Otherwise, everything else I am absolutely 100% sure was abilities of the arms and the legs. I cannot think of any other reason why these limb enhancers would be given to a gem who clearly has abilities of her own, if Homeworld did not want to limit those abilities by making that gem dependent on the technology rather than their own capabilities. And as I have said in a previous video, I do think that that's what Homeworld was doing by giving Peridot the limb enhancers. And so of course they would want to make sure that she were using as few of her own abilities in conjunction with those enhancers as possible. You were talking about characterization, and I was curious, if you had to rank them, which characters do you think get the least characterization overall? This includes any that is implied off screen. And who would you like to see get more focused attention, i.e. Amethyst, Lapis, etc.? I think Amethyst has gotten plenty of characterization lately. I was really worried for a while that they weren't really going to do much more with her, but I'm not super worried about that anymore. And my audio setup just crashed, unfortunately, so that probably means that the first few answers in this video are going to be accompanied by the really crappy audio from my camera here. As much as that sucks, I don't want to go back and say all that stuff again. Sorry. Anyway, Amethyst. I think she's gotten plenty of characterization lately. I was worried about it for a while, but the show has alleviated my concerns quite a bit by giving her, admittedly, a whole lot of characterization all at once, which isn't always a good thing, but it wasn't bad characterization, so I really enjoyed it. You called out Lapis here. I would really like to see Lapis get more characterization, like so much more. Her and Peridot both at this point, because Peridot has almost become a caricature of the character that she used to be. I'm not someone who wants her to go back to being the stone cold biatch that we knew when she first appeared. I like Peridot as she is now. It's just I like her as she is now when she's being treated like an actual character, like in Room for Ruby. I thought she was really good in Room for Ruby most of the time. There were a couple of times where she was a little over the top and a little bit Peridot-y. That is surprisingly hard to say. But yeah, I'd really like to see her get more characterization. And of all people, despite what I said about it in the past, I'd really like to see Ronaldo get more characterization. Enunciate. The last time that we saw him, he seemed to greatly regress in his characterization. And I get, sometimes not all characters in a story are meant to move forward. Sometimes they are meant to just be what they are, but I'm not convinced that that's the case with Ronaldo. There's so much good setup there for a really compelling, really relatable character, and I just, at this point, don't find him either of those things, so I'd like to see that change. The next one of these from the email account is from the same guy as the last one, so I'm actually going to skip that one and save it for the next video. Instead, let's go with this one. What do you think of the theory that the show will end the same way as Destiny's End from the episode Open Book? I like the idea of Steven turning human so that he and Connie can get married and grow old together. Maybe even have some kids. Steven would have strawberries on his wedding cake. I hate that idea, and I'm not saying that it's a bad idea, don't get me wrong. I don't hate the theory or whatever. It's not my idea of how the show should end. And not even because it's a bad ending, but because we were already shown it. I want the ending to be a surprise. I want it to be something that we can see coming based on the events, that we can look back on and say, oh hey, I see where this grew organically from the narrative as a whole. But I don't want it to be something that we've already been outright shown. Something similar to that, sure. But I also want to be very, very clear here. Steven is human. He's just a human with gem traits. He does age, and he can make himself age even faster if he wants to. There's no reason why he can't grow old with Connie, get married to Connie, have kids with Connie, without remaining exactly as he is now, just older. And that aspect of it, I absolutely do want to see. I want to see him end up with Connie. I love the two of them together. But that exact same ending? Absolutely not. I'm sorry if it came off as a little harsher than I intended it to. I don't particularly like the idea. Alright, so this one, the grammar in it is a little weird, and I don't want to be insensitive and completely rearrange their words to fix it because they may not be a native English speaker. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put it up here and I'm going to go over what the gist of it is. Basically, they're asking, what if the diamonds aren't as strong as we've been led to believe? And additionally, what if they are some sort of prototype for the other gems, which the other gems then built upon, and suggest that it even fits within the idea of my video that gems were not originally made to work for the diamonds. And from what I can tell, they're asking, if the gems are as powerful as we've been led to believe, why weren't they able to stop the rebellion? I'll answer that last part first. I'm not sure why Rose was so successful at her rebellion. The best guess that I have is that the diamonds were just so set in their ways, they were so sure that their order was perfect, and that the only gems that needed to fight for them were the gems assigned to fight for them, that they only sent designated soldier gems to fight against Rose, whereas Rose had an army of misfit gems who kind of all taught themselves how to fight, so she actually ended up having roughly the same numbers as Homeworld was sending against her. Literally the best guess I can come up with, because it doesn't really follow logic. As for whether or not the diamonds are as powerful as we've been led to believe, even after seeing their displays of power in the recent episodes, I still think it's possible that they aren't quite as dangerous as they make themselves out to be. It would only make sense for the all-powerful dictators of a totalitarian society to play up how strong they are, but I definitely do not think that they were the prototypes for other gems, that they are in any way like the original gems. I did a video called The Origin of Gems where I postulate that gems are sort of the end result of a very advanced process creating more and more advanced autonomous creatures, potentially for thousands of years. I think that the original gems, if you can even call them gems, were vastly different and only really shared the humanoid form that we see gems assume today, and that the diamonds came much later than the original prototype gems. Let's go ahead and do 2 from the email account. I do have actually quite a few of these in here compared to the ones that I've collected myself. This is actually a fairly easy one. I don't see permission in here to use your name, so if you intended me to include your name in the video, I apologize, I'm going to black it out. What do you think the exact purpose of the armor of the fallen seen in Lion 2 and Rose's scabbard is? Do you think that it relates to the gem shards seen in Fribo, or is it similar to the weapons upgrades seen in Bismuth, kind of building on the whole training to use the weapon concept? Like if Jasper wore it, would she be able to summon a suit of armor instead of just a helmet or something? I think it's definitely more of the former rather than the latter. I can't imagine why the crystal gems would have kept shards around and taught them specifically to animate armor, because Pearl did say that they were used specifically to animate armor, and they were gem shards, so they had to be taught that behavior. That isn't just something that they would automatically know to do. So I think the armor of the fallen was almost definitely armor collected maybe from fallen human allies, hence the name, and then animated with these gem shards, or maybe it was called armor of the fallen because it was animated by the shards of a fallen gem. So yeah, definitely related, I think, to the shards from Fribo. I'm actually really happy that I get to address this one in a video, because it's one that I've been hearing a lot over on my Tumblr specifically. Again, I don't see any permission here to use your name, so I'm going to black it out. I apologize if the intention was for me to include your name in the video. Hi AJ, I'm a longtime fan of your channel on YouTube, and you're always my go-to for reviews and discussions of Steven Universe content. Why, thank you. Anyway, I wanted to ask you about the 2 least known diamonds, White and Pink. First, I know that you believe that Garnet's and Eyeball's accounts of what happened to Pink Diamond are fact. It's actually what next week's video is going to be about, by the way. So I wanted to run another theory by you. Not the common Pearl shapeshifted as Rose. But what if White Diamond was actually responsible for shattering Pink, either directly or indirectly, and made it appear as Rose was responsible? My theory is maybe Rose was winning the favor of many gems in the rebellion, and maybe even was winning the favor of Pink Diamond. And maybe Pink went to White Diamond with ideas of choice, free will, etc. And recognizing this as a threat, especially if she could win Blue and Yellow's favor, she, that being White, plotted to have her shattered and use her own gems. The rose quartz as a symbol to use for propaganda. If you think about it, I always found it odd that Homeworld would just abandon and forget about Earth, just because of presumably Pink Diamond's shatter. But what if White foresaw the inevitable loss of the war? I think the reason we have yet to know anything about White yet is because she will tie everything up. The ultimate manipulating force of the entire series. Curious on your thoughts because you brought up Homeworld propaganda in one of your videos. Okay, there's a lot to cover here, which is why this is going to be the last one of the video. I'm going to go ahead and minimize my browser so there's not quite as blaring white a glare on my face. I want to make it clear that I still firmly believe that White Diamond is the leader of all of the gems on Homeworld, including the other diamonds, which is why I really don't think this is the case. I think if any of the diamonds had anything to do with Pink Diamond's death, it was Yellow Diamond. Slight spoilers for next week's video, sorry. Because I think if White Diamond saw Pink Diamond as a threat, and therefore off-color or defective, depending on which term you want to use. If White Diamond began to see Pink Diamond as a gem who could not fulfill her role to Homeworld society, White Diamond could have just had her shattered. It doesn't make sense that if Homeworld is so dedicated to keeping the order of their society that those rules would only apply to gems lesser than the diamonds. Maybe the diamonds aren't held up to quite as much scrutiny as other gems, but if a diamond becomes unable to do their job, I see absolutely no reason to assume that they wouldn't be shattered just like any other gem. And because I think White Diamond is above the other
diamonds, I don't see why she would have to go behind the backs of the other diamonds to have this done. You also seem to have the timeline a little mixed up. First of all, the rose quartz gems that are bubbled weren't bubbled after Pink Diamond was shattered. They were bubbled after Rose rebelled. It was after Pink Diamond was shattered that Yellow Diamond, and maybe White Diamond as well, we don't really know, began pushing for those rose quartz gems to be shattered as well, and Blue Diamond stuck up for them and refused. So bubbling the rose quartz could not have been propaganda to help convince people that Rose killed Pink Diamond. I'm also 100% convinced that whatever the situation, even if Rose doesn't end up being the one who actually did it, she intended to. Because the way that Garnet spoke about her motives, she wasn't just guessing at them, she was stating them as fact, which means she spoke to Rose and she heard these motives from Rose herself. There's no other way to look at it. Either she heard these motives from Rose herself, or Garnet, who promised never to lie to Stephen again, and so far has not broken that promise, lied to Stephen by not making it clear to him that she was only guessing at his mother's motivations. We also know that despite the fact that Rose was winning the war for a while, that did not remain the case. She only shattered Pink Diamond in a final desperate attempt to drive Homeworld away from Earth. Homeworld showed no reservations towards killing Rose's people, whereas Rose refused to kill anyone. She may have had a similar sized army at the beginning, but at about the halfway point of the war, when Rose finally dug in and decided to kill Pink Diamond, that was no longer the case. Rose was being overwhelmed. Rose and her forces were being overwhelmed. If she were winning the war, there would have been no reason for her to take that step. There would have been no reason for her to kill Pink Diamond as a necessity to ensure the rights and the freedoms of the gems under her command. So no, White Diamond did not foresee Homeworld's loss in the war. Homeworld didn't lose the war. They didn't abandon Earth. They repurposed it into an incubator for the cluster. And while I agree with you that once we meet White Diamond, everything will sort of come together, it's really the only reason I can think of why she hasn't been in the show so far. I don't think it's for the reasons that you think. I will be talking about this a little bit and reiterating quite a lot of this stuff. I shouldn't have even included this in this video. In next week's video, it's a brief compilation of some of the most likely scenarios that I think occurred around Pink Diamond shattering, so hopefully that will elaborate on my feelings on this subject a little bit better. As for right now, I'm just gonna leave it at that. And as per usual, I'd like to ask, what did you think of any of the topics brought up or discussed in this video? Let's get a discussion going in the comment section down below. And I would like to remind you again, if you do have any questions that you would like to contribute to any future Q&A videos, you can submit them either at my Tumblr page, which will be in the description down below, or you can send them to my email address specifically designated for that purpose, ajqa@gmail.com, and I do look forward to any and all of your submissions. Either way, this has been AJ22, and I will talk to you guys later.